Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes, and these are the three big stories for today. So the first and the most inescapable story, the one that you have to talk about, is the Biden-Trump debate that was held last night. Now, I just did a video about that. I posted it just 2 minutes ago, where I walked through about a dozen different clips to show you some things that are really important to understand. So if you really want to deep dive into that, you can look at this. But what's happening now is the commentary about it, and it's pretty significant. Let's start here with Pravda. Pravda says Biden and Trump prefer to call each other names rather than discuss Ukraine and the Middle East. Well, they did discuss Ukraine and the Middle East, but they did also call each other names. They didn't say anything substantial. Now, Kelly Vlahos from Responsible Statecraft wrote this, and I think it captures the essence of it pretty nicely. On Ukraine and Israel, President Biden and former President Trump inflated, conflated, bloviated their way through 11 minutes of foreign policy discussion, only turning back to the topics in fleeting moments of taunting incoherence during the rest of the time on stage. Okay, that's actually a pretty good summary, and it was carried by Pravda, weirdly. Okay, Euromaidan Press hit the only significant thing that was said about it, at least from the Trumpian side, and Trump did state, and this is true, he stated that he does not accept Putin's conditions for ending the war, which included Russia retaining claimed Ukrainian territory and Ukraine abandoning its NATO bid. He said clearly no to that, while President Biden cautioned that Putin seeks to reestablish the Soviet Union. Biden was more full-throatedly supporting it. Trump was talking about it almost like he was already ceding Ukraine. I show you that in the video. Okay. Jason J. Smart, the expectations for tonight for Biden were just to show up and look alive, and he blew it. Post-debate focus group. Democrats still have 68 days until the convention, plenty of time to replace Biden as a candidate. That could happen. It is possible if Biden simply steps aside and says, I know you voted for me in the primary, but I'm stepping aside. It could actually happen. I think he's going to get a lot of pressure to do it, and I don't know that he will. Top opinion writers at the New York Times. Now, the New York Times is going to be all in the bag for Biden and all against Trump, right? And the Atlantic calling on Biden to step down. Honestly, I think it's going to happen. I don't know. I mean, the New York Times is calling for it. And then, look, the debate was a total and complete disaster for Biden. He looked old. His answers trailed off repeatedly. He was hard to understand. He would stop in mid-sentence and move on to something else. I never thought he would be this bad. Stunning. Truly. Now, remember, this is a CNN commentator's reaction to it. This is Friedman. He's also at the New York Times. Wow. New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman, who is a personal friend of President Biden, calls him to get out of the race. Quote, I watched the Biden-Trump debate alone in a Lisbon hotel room, and it made me weep. Now, remember, he wants Biden to win. Right? These are people that are supportive of Biden. They like his policies. They want what he's doing, right? I cannot remember a more heartbreaking moment in American presidential campaign politics in my lifetime, precisely because of what it revealed. Joe Biden, a good man and a good president, has no business running for re-election. If he does, everyday Americans will hail Joe Biden for doing what Donald Trump would never do, put the country before himself. Now, again, we don't know that anything's going to happen, but even all his allies are saying you have no place doing this. Now, I've told you for a long time, look, I'm a Republican, conservative. I don't support Trump. That's MAGA. That's populist. That's not the Reagan kind of vein of republicanism. And so I don't support Trump. And I've told you as well, I just can't bring myself to support Trump, and I can't bring myself to support Biden. After last night, a lot of people are in that camp. If you're in that camp now after watching that debate last night, put in the comments below. I get it if you feel that way. Like if you're like, oh, wow, Biden's not right. I don't know that I want him to be, holding the nuclear button, but I can't support Trump. If you're like that, just put it in the comments below. Okay, even this, New York Times opinion writers on who they think won between Biden and Trump. Biden won or Trump won. These are New York Times opinion writers. Who are these guys that are saying it's an equal split? Like that's lunacy. Like if you're watching this and you think that Biden won that debate last night, you're just not seeing political reality. Maybe you just want Biden to win so badly, and that's understandable. We all do that, right? I get that I could be clouded as well. But if you're thinking that Biden walked, like nobody's thinking that. Okay, at any rate, let's switch gears to big story number 2 and look at what's going on in Europe. Finland has announced 24th military aid package for Ukraine worth 159 million euros, totaling 2.2 billion euros from February 2022, a decision approved by President Alexander Stubb following government proposal. Okay, so that's great. And Finland is committed to supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia's unjustified aggression. It's not only about Ukraine, but also about the right of all free peoples to a decent existence. We, the Finns, know from our own history how important this issue is, says the Finnish defense minister. Okay, Poland also stepping up. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that the security agreement with Ukraine is almost complete and will be signed 99% before the NATO summit in Washington in July. Okay, so that's the bilateral agreement between Poland and Ukraine, and there's now 20 of these. Ukraine has signed 20 security agreements with allies, including the EU and the USA. And these agreements will result in international partners providing Ukraine with military support worth at least $60 billion over the next 4 years. Okay, so that's not $60 billion each year, but over the next 4 years, you have this at least going for you. Okay, last little bit, but you have a spoiler here. Hungary's imminent EU Council presidency from July 1 will see intensified communication with Ukraine, but it upholds its position against providing military support through the European Peace Facility, Orban's advisor says. So we'll see how Hungary may play havoc with the EU as they move forward. Last of the 3 big stories, the ECHR, that is the European Court of Human Rights, has a damning judgment against Russia over systematic violations in occupied Crimea. The European Court of Human Rights has issued its judgment in the first of several interstate cases brought by Ukraine against Russia, with the court finding Russia guilty of multiple human rights violations since its invasion of occupied Crimea. The Grand Chamber, in its 25 June judgment, agreed with Ukraine that these violations are systematic. Listen to this. It's also telling that all parts of the judgment were passed unanimously by the 17 judges. That is, it's not like it was a split decision, maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't. No. Russia has already stated that it does not plan to comply with the judgment. Russia's only argument in all cases brought before international courts has been to deny the specific jurisdiction. Russia's attempt to claim that the court lacked jurisdiction in the case of Ukraine versus Russia about Crimea was dismissed by the Grand Chamber on 14 January 2021. The court found that Russia has exerted effective control over Crimea since 27 February 2014, the day Russian soldiers without insignia seized control. So they were trying to say, look, we pulled out of this treaty, and so we're not, no, but you've been there since 2014 doing what you're doing. Its position now is based on the spurious claim that the court has no jurisdiction because Russia withdrew from the European Convention on Human Rights in 2022 after being effectively thrown out of the Council of Europe because of its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The argument is entirely invalid since the case in question covered violations since Russia's invasion of Crimea. Ukraine's representative on ECHR matters reported that this is the first judgment where an international court has found the Russian Federation responsible for a policy of wide-scale and systematic violations of a range of human rights and freedoms in occupied Crimea. These were not individual or isolated violations. They had been sufficiently numerous and interconnected to amount to a pattern of systematic violations. Russia violated the international humanitarian law through its application of Russian legislation in occupied Crimea. Like they came in, took over, and then said, well, you're now Russia and we're applying our law to you. In view of this, the court found that Russia had extended this application of law in Crimea in breach of the convention. And lastly, it found that there had been a pattern of retaliatory prosecution and misuse of criminal law and a general crackdown on political opposition to Russian policies in Crimea. Listen, this last little bit was just killing me. The list of Russia's violations of the European Convention is almost exhaustive. That is, they violated almost everything possible, with the only violation of fundamental rights and freedoms that Russia was not found guilty of being under Article 4, the prohibition of slavery and forced labor. I bet you if you look hard enough, you could probably find some of that as well. Okay, so this is a huge judgment against Russia, and while they don't recognize it, they were part of this treaty once upon a time, and okay. All right, that's all that I have. I'm going to leave you with this question. I mean, is Joe okay? And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to score partisan points, because I know that Trump's not, but is Joe okay? And if you're on the left side and you're an American and you're on the left side of the political spectrum, are you just, I'm still going with Biden, or are you going to start agitating for a new candidate, or what exactly are you going to do? But welcome to my problems where you can't choose this and you can't choose that. I mean, I understand. Now watch this video next if you want full-scale comprehensive analysis of what happened in the debate. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.